All right. Recording is in progress. There we go. Thank you. Yeah, let's get started. I'm going to pull up our presentation here. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that here. So welcome. I appreciate you all joining us this morning, and certainly, we're always looking for topics that are interesting to our community and that we can share out in relationship to how Pillars addresses those situations, and certainly bring in our partners whenever possible as well. I'm Matt Malm. I'm the Community Engagement Director, and we want to thank you again for coming this morning. Pillar's mission is to provide shelter support and solutions to address the housing needs in our community. And our vision is that we lead our community in finding innovative, effective solutions to experiences of homelessness, so that they are rare, brief, and everyone has a place to call home. As I said, as some of you came in this morning, our values are respect, collaboration, empowerment, and grit. This is a little overview of our continuum of services. Our main programs that we look at are crisis housing, supportive housing, and stable housing, but we have a lot of sub-programs in between there. So ranging from prevention and diversion, making sure that people are able to stay housed and don't enter shelter at all. They're able to avoid that part. And then we have street outreach, which is working with the unsheltered. We have our adult shelter, adult and family shelter, and resource center, and then a number of different housing programs as well. If you're here today, that means that you're a part of Pillar's team, and we certainly thank you for that and appreciate your time. We're going to pop up a poll here just to kind of get a pulse on where everybody's joining from today. I know a lot of times we have some of our donors, we have volunteers, we have staff joining in, so we like to kind of gauge that and see where everybody's coming from today. There it is. Can you all see that on your screen? Awesome. All right. Looks like a couple more people still. All right, so it's slowed down quite a bit there. I'm seeing about, it's a pretty good split. We've got about 8 people that are just visiting, identified as community members. We've got 8 that have identified themselves as donors, another 5 volunteers. We've got a couple board members on today, Pillars partners. Awesome. Looks great. Thank you. So today we have invited Amber Schroeder in today from Harbor House. Amber is Harbor House's executive director. Amber has a wealth of experience in the nonprofit sector, anywhere from national, state, and local organizations. At Harbor House, she leads a team of 40 staff members that work to serve victims and survivors of domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and they provide a variety of services, including one-on-one advocacy, support groups, legal and housing support, emergency shelter, crisis advocacy, as well as providing services and support to those who have abusive behaviors. And Bryn is one of Pillar's case managers here. Bryn specifically focuses on our tenant-based rental assistant program. That's TBRA, so you'll hear that later, just so you have a little bit of background on what that is. Her main focus is on permanent and supportive housing. She specializes in services for victims of domestic violence, veterans, and other clients. Bryn is passionate about working with families and strives to end generational abuse by supporting parents in modeling healthy household behaviors. So you're going to hear a little bit from both of them. And I'm going to pass over the controls to Amber, and she's going to give you a little bit more of a deep dive into Harbor House's services and how some of those differ from Pillars as well. So Amber, you should have control of the slides, and I'll hand it off to you.
Okay, I think we're good. Can you all hear me? Couldn't find my mute button there. I haven't had enough coffee. Thanks so much, Matt, and thanks to Pillars team for inviting Harbor House in to chat about domestic violence and Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is really important to us because, as you can see here, that two of our largest barriers for folks to access service with us are the community's lack of understanding of our services and the community's lack of understanding of what domestic violence is. So I'm really excited to spend a little bit of time with you today sharing about those two things. Most people know Harbor House for our shelter program. We do have a 68-bed shelter for victims of domestic violence for those who are in need of emergency safety. But what most people also don't know is that that is only about 1/3 of the clients we serve. The other 2/3 of the clients we serve engage in a variety of different services, which include those who never come into shelter but still access services. That would include both in domestic violence and sexual violence. We have a team of folks that provide culturally specific advocacy and move within the Hmong, Latinx, Black, and Native communities. We have a housing navigation program that program does work closely with Pillars, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. We have a couple of folks on staff who work specifically with children who have experienced domestic violence or sexual violence. We have a team of folks also that is legal advocacy. While they cannot provide legal advice, they really can help victims navigate a complex legal system. Many victims are in more than one legal system, and they could be in family systems and criminal courts. And they really help navigate and walk alongside the client as they go through those processes. The community education program is what we're doing today, getting out into the community and sharing a little bit more about our work and helping folks understand domestic violences and the services that we have here at Harbor House. We have a K-12 prevention program. We have 2 staff that go into schools, K-12, and educate kids on domestic and sexual violence in the hopes of preventing that from ever happening. So if kids can identify what that looks like, then they can either say, this is happening to me and get support, or even better, ensure it never happens because they can identify it before it occurs. New this fall, we have a violence intervention program. This program works with those who use abusive behaviors. This is really getting at our vision of a community free of domestic and sexual violence. So working with people who are using those behaviors and looking to provide healing and ultimately end those behaviors and end future victimizations. We also have an office in Chilton in Calumet County. We serve both Outagamie and Calumet counties. So there is staff out there that works to serve victims of violence. We have a 24-hour crisis line, and then we also have a volunteer program, as Pillars does as well. And I know that they all join me in being very grateful for the volunteers that help make our organizations work. As we think about domestic violence, I think it's important to think about or to understand how huge it is in our community. So on average, 1 in every 4 women and 1 in every 9 men experience domestic violence in their lifetime. So, just on this, by the nature of about 50 people being on this call, you could think about how many in this room with those statistics may have experienced domestic violence. Domestic violence is the leading cause of injury to women ages 15 to 44, and it is the 3rd leading cause of homelessness among families. So our work really does overlap with Pillars, and we're grateful for their partnership in this regard. 50% of homeless women report domestic violence as the cause. I would just say that domestic violence affects everyone. It's not just a women's issue. There is no gender, race, sexuality, economic status that can prevent domestic violence from happening to you. It is most prevalent women that are victims. And when a male is a victim, it is most common that it is a male partner still. But that does not mean it's always. So that's something also that I think is hard. If you're thinking about a male who might need to seek services to break through those barriers and really understand that, yes, it can happen to anyone and there is no gender that's excluded from domestic violence. So I think it's really important to really have a good understanding of what domestic violence is. It is a systematic pattern of behaviors in a relationship that are used to gain or maintain power and control. This isn't the fight that you have over the toothbrush on the sink. This isn't the small things that you in a relationship could argue about. It's about a pattern of control to get power, or a pattern of behaviors to get power rather, and control. So it's a longer term thing. It's not something that's just a one-off sort of fight or instance in your relationship. One of the things we really like to talk about when we're thinking about victimizations, and what we often hear, is how society views victims. So the most common thing that we would hear is, why don't they leave? Well, that's really easy to say, right? There's a couple of things that we should think about in that. Why don't they leave? They might not leave because, no relationship starts out violent. It's just something that builds over time. This relationship is founded in love. There are children and things. There's patterns of isolation that occur that make people feel like they are not capable of leaving, that they don't have the abilities to do that. So if they leave, if they don't leave, if they stay, that's what we're talking about, society will say, that's ridiculous, just get out. If they fight back, then oftentimes they are labeled the perpetrator of domestic violence. Many times when police are called to a scene of a domestic, the victim is labeled the perpetrator because they finally fought back. So a lot of times we can be working with somebody who is in court systems as a perpetrator of domestic violence or as using abusive behaviors, and they're actually the victim. And then if they leave, they deal with society's view of that as well. So that could be what their kids think, or what people think about if they're just starting over with nothing, or and because of all the isolation they've experienced as domestic violence, it could also be that they have nothing. They've lost their entire family. They've lost a social life. So there's so many different things affecting domestic violence, and because of all these things, it makes it really hard for victims to get help, which is why we like to sit and kind of think through all of these things. I think we also like folks to understand that in children in homes where violence occurs or are physically abused are neglected at a 1,500% higher than average national rate. So if there's violence occurring, it's always impacting the kids in the home, whether or not they are actually being targeted. And then those abused children are arrested at 4 times more often than the non-abused children. So that's all the risk factors that cause this. This is what really leads into that generational cycle of violence. And this is why you're going to see Harbor House move into a direction of serving people who use abusive behaviors. What we understand about abuse is that it is a learned behavior. You're not born abusive. And it's what contributes to the generational nature. So if we know someone is victimized as a child, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes, what we could see is one of 2 things happen. They are either very likely to become a future victim of domestic violence, or they are very likely to become someone who uses abusive behavior. So this is really getting at those root causes and thinking about how we can prevent ongoing domestic violence and really break through that generational nature. So this is something else we really like to share. So domestic violence is obviously our work. It's what we do every day, all day. But with everything going on in our society, things get really tricky in identifying domestic violence. So certainly alcohol and drugs become a coping mechanism for people who are experiencing domestic violence. Mental health is an ongoing issue for people who are experiencing domestic violence, the trauma that occurs and how it affects your mental health. Homelessness, we talked about before. sorry, I just saw the note here from Fawn and I got hung up. Homelessness is something that also occurs with domestic violence. It's very common, it's 50%. Joblessness and medical issues also start happening. Victims of domestic violence are very likely to have ongoing medical issues that include pain diseases, fibromyalgia, et cetera, et cetera. Joblessness occurs because victims of domestic violence are often not allowed to work by their partner. So then they are in financial hardship. Incarceration occurs. We talked about that just before. So incarceration happens when a victim finally fights back. Oppression, all of the oppressions that we experience in the world, especially for communities of color, are another layer that affects domestic violence. And then we also have systems trauma, which people who have to interact with the system over and over again and aren't capable of seeing or aren't capable of navigating that system then begin to have systems trauma. All this to say that when all these things get layered on top of domestic violence, look at how little you can actually see the domestic violence. It becomes something that's so buried underneath all of these other things that it's not often seen or identified appropriately as the root cause of all the other issues. So that's why these conversations we're having today are super important. I want to talk a little bit about domestic violence in housing since we're chatting with the Pillars team. What we are seeing here at Harbor House is this community is in a housing crisis. That's not abnormal compared to the rest of our nation. It's a problem we're all experiencing. But when you add domestic violence to that housing crisis, what we see for victims is that they have damages on their record and they have past or no rental history. So the past rental history could be negative. They could have past rent that wasn't paid, and that's often due to victimization. So a partner could put a lease in somebody's name and they may never know that the lease is in their name. Or they could have no rental history. Their partner never allowed them to be on a lease, so they are 40 years old, have no rental history, no credit, and are trying to get their first apartment after leaving a relationship. They often have law enforcement history. So they have a history of law enforcement showing up, and that often causes problems with landlords who don't want that, or other tenants in the complex. Because of the isolation that occurs with domestic violence, they don't have a support system for co-signers or support. And then, like I said, why would a landlord say yes when all of these things are on the list? So you have all these things going on, and we can try to educate and support clients in this, but in a tight rental market, why would a landlord say yes to this kind of risk? So that's something we're really experiencing, and we're grateful for the partnership with Pillars. And I'm sure Bryn is going to talk a little bit more about our partnership and with our housing. This is my email address. If you have any further questions, you're always welcome to call. And our phone number should be on here as well, but it is 832-1667. I'll put it in the chat. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amber. And maybe let's pause here just for a moment, and we'll see if anybody has any questions specifically for Amber and Harbor House before we dive into Pillars and how we work with Harbor House. Caitlin, are you seeing any questions from the chat? No questions?
Hi, everybody. This is Sarah Schneider. I have a quick question for Amber. Does Harbor House work with law enforcement and specifically the jail to identify those who are incarcerated as a result of being the perpetrator versus the victim? I volunteer in the jail and I see this a lot.
For sure. So we have super strong relationships with both the police department, the district attorney's office, the sheriff's department, and the jail. And that plays out in a couple of different ways. The first really important way that plays out is if there is an arrest at the scene of a crime and a perpetrator is taken in and they are put on a hold or they are placed in incarcerated for however long, when they are released, the jail calls Harbor House, and if the victim desires it, Harbor House calls the victim and lets them know that their partner is being released, and we work to develop a safe plan with that victim. The victim may say, I'm good, they're coming home, I'm cool with that, and we are supportive and work to make sure they're safe as much as we can. And if they don't feel safe, then we work around that. That might mean shelter, that might mean finding a friend or family member to stay with for a little while. There's a whole wide range of things. We also have a specific group here at Harbor House that is for specifically at this time women who have been arrested but have been that we, Harbor House, has identified as the victim. So we work through what is going on, what caused the arrest, what healthy coping behaviors look like, what is safety plans, and all of those things. What happens sometimes when you're in a long-term domestic abuse or abusive relationship is that your coping can start to look abusive. So what we really work through is those components and thinking about what safety looks like outside of those maladaptive coping behaviors.
Awesome.
So
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Great question. All right, I'm going to pull our presentation back up here and we'll switch gears over to Bryn and she'll talk a little bit about pillars.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes, awesome. Thank you guys so much for getting up bright and early and joining me here this morning. This is a topic I feel super passionate about and I really love the work I do with pillars. So I'm so excited to get the opportunity to talk about it a bit. So as Matt said before, I am the case manager for our tenant-based rental assistance program. And the acronym we use for that is TBRA. So in that program, clients are responsible for putting 30% of whatever their income is at the time towards their rent. If they don't have any income, they're responsible for a minimum of $100 in whatever way that looks like, and we kind of figure out how to make that work. Then Appleton Housing Authority covers the remainder of the rent. So landlords are still getting their full rent, so they'll still rent to our clients, but the rent is just more affordable for the stage of their life that they're in. Over the course of the time in the TBRA program, it can be a maximum of 24 months, so 2 years. And clients meet with me weekly. We discuss barriers to housing in the past, how they originally ended up in shelter, employment, budgeting, things like that. And there are some requirements in order to successfully complete the program. One of those is completing a Rent Smart class through UW, which teaches good skills to be an ideal tenant. They also have to complete a monthly budgeting form. They fill out I fill out a point sheet, making sure they meet all our criteria. So it's a really awesome program that they have that extra support. If clients do successfully complete the program, meaning that they meet all those requirements I just listed, they can prioritize for what's called a Section 8 voucher, which is just that continued rental assistance indefinitely without the case management. So it really sets people up for success and affordable housing long term. Currently in our TBRA program, we are serving 10 adult women, 11 female children, 15 male children, and we have 2 little peanuts on the way that will be joining our program pretty soon here. It is not exclusively for women. Men are welcome to be pulled from the program. I will go into detail a little bit about how we get clients in the program. Some come directly from Harbor House and some are referred to me on the coordinated entry list, which is just a big list from the city that prioritizes people in need of help with housing. So those are just the people that were referred to me, and just due to the nature of DV, a lot of times it is more specifically women, as Amber spoke about, but men are welcome to be in the program as well. So collaboration that we have with Harbor House. So Amber did an awesome job really going over all the services they offer in addition to having a shelter, the vast amount of services they provide. So something that Pillars really relies on Harbor House for assistance with is legal advocacy. I'm not a lawyer, I don't have any law background, and legal matters aren't really something you can kind of just trial and error your way through. You kind of got to know what's going on with that. So I'm really grateful for the help with Harbor House when it comes to legal matters. And as Amber also talked about, in domestic violence situations, they come up a lot, even just with arrests and things within the domestic violence situation, after the fact, restraining orders, custody arrangements, child support, all those things that have to go through the courts. So that's really awesome that they offer that service. Additionally, safety planning. So when clients do find housing, I work really closely with the advocates there to create a plan of how can we make this as safe as possible? How can we keep, the location secure? How can we prevent the abuser from showing up at their door? Things like that. Pillars on the flip hand does a really awesome job helping with housing. Obviously, they have a whole shelter full of individuals who are going to need to find a different place to live. So that's where Pillars comes in. We have a wonderful services advocate. Her name is Kim. She monitors our phone. She's the first person you're going to talk to when you call. She can kind of troubleshoot, talk about your situation, recommend things to do, send you a housing search guide. So she's a really awesome resource to have there. And additionally, we have our Pillars shelters. So the main goal of Harbor House is not just to be a shelter for people experiencing homelessness, it's for specifically domestic violence victims. But when people come who, maybe after further conversation, it's really not a domestic violence matter, more just they need somewhere to stay, send them on over to us and we can help them out there. But what I personally think is the coolest way that we collaborate is partnership apartments. I will advance to the next slide and tell you a little more about here. So partnership apartments is an apartment complex that is attached to Harbor House. The building itself is Pillars owned and it's individual apartments. It's not a shelter. Each person that stays there has their own apartment that's just for them. It looks just like any other apartment, but the only difference is that it's attached to Harbor House. In partnership, we have three bedrooms and 3 2-bedrooms. So it's 3 floors, 2 units on each floor. The way that individuals get into partnership apartments is they have to be referred directly from the Harbor House shelter. So up until not too long ago, when a unit would open up, I would just send out an email to all the advocates saying, hey, we have this 2-bedroom, send me applicants over, and they would send me a bunch of people. About a month ago, we realized that that's probably not the most effective way to go about this. Just waste people's time filling out application and getting their hopes up that they're going to be housed if they're not going to be selected. And with the way the market is right now, clients already go through so much of that. We didn't want to be creating more stress and adding more trauma and disappointment and things like that. So what we decided is that I'm going to reach out to the individual that oversees the shelter. His name is Jennifer. And we are going to have a conversation about who might be a good fit. A lot of times in the past, we've gotten individuals who are just looking for an apartment, a place to live. And I don't judge that one bit. That's what we all want. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel comfortable. And again, the way the market is right now, that's not always easy to come by. However, that doesn't always work out the best in a programming setting. Some individuals, they just aren't ready to, leave their abuser. They're just not mentally in a place to do that. They're not ready to make some of the positive changes that we require. They don't necessarily want someone popping in and chatting with them every week about what they're doing. So we're really looking for individuals who are in a state of mind where they're ready to make these changes that I discussed. So Jennifer and I have a conversation about, who have they worked with at shelter that is really exhibiting that, they're ready for this. And then they'll send them over to me. I look for individuals who do have higher barriers that maybe aren't going to have the best shot at other places. The only major deterrent for getting into partnership is that you can't have violent charges on your record, just due to the safety aspect and all the things that the other tenants have experienced. We want to make it physically as safe a place as possible. But other than that, we'll take people with evictions, that people owe money. We don't really any other charges besides anything violent, we can work past. So, it's a really good opportunity for people to find housing that other landlords may not give them a shot. Here are pictures of the hallways at partnership apartments. I wanted to put a picture of the units. They're actually quite cute and cozy, but just due to confidentiality and respecting people's privacy, I didn't do that. But here is what the hallways look like. As you can see, there's a little toy of some kind over there. It's a really cute place, lots of kiddos. All the moms are kind of understanding of each other and they know how kids are. So it's a really cool and unique atmosphere. And I know Amber talked a little bit about barriers in housing, but I just wanted to elaborate on that. So in securing housing, as we spoke about a little bit, a lot of the people I work with have really poor rental history due to DV. A lot of times there are lots of police calls due to domestic violence situations. There's money owed, like Amber talked about, people don't even know that the lease was in their name. A lot of times there's a lot of damages left to the apartment due to domestic violence situation, holes in the walls, things like that. A lot of noise complaints and things from neighbors. A lot of people don't have any rental history at all. A lot of times it's really hard to put rental history on future applications due to the fact that if they were staying with their abuser, with the abuser's family, they don't want someone calling and saying, hey, it's so-and-so from the apartment located at this address, and your previous victim is trying to move in here. They don't want their abuser to know exactly where they're going. So it's hard to establish that rental history, even if they do have it. Once we secure housing, the barriers continue in maintaining it. So a lot of time there is a lack of social support from friends, and family. And that can look different in a lot of ways. So a key point of abuse is that abusers like to isolate their victims. They like to make it an issue when the victim wants to spend time with friends and family. Friends and family get frustrated that why isn't this person just leave a year ago? So a lot of times by the time they get to me, they don't have those relationships anymore. This picture I attached here is a team of individuals. The 3 on the right are volunteers, and then the younger gentleman is our very sweet front desk man. And I recruited them to move one of my clients, which that is not a service we offer. But the individual just truly did not have any social supports to come help her. It was a single mom. She didn't have, one person can't really lift these, couches and beds and things like that. And I really tried, to troubleshoot with her. Who could we ask? Who could we follow up with? She just didn't have anybody. So Pillars does what we do, and we all banded together, and then we got her moved, and it was really an awesome experience. But I thought that just really highlighted how sometimes people truly don't have anybody who's willing to help them. All of my clients that I'm currently working with are single parent households, and a lot of them have multiple kiddos, 3, 4, 5 kids. And when it is a single parent household, now that you have left that abuser, even if the abuser, it wasn't a healthy relationship, it was still somebody physically there who could watch the kids or who was going to work every day. So now there's that battle of, how am I going to get a job? Okay, now I got a job, and now I have to secure childcare, and now I have to secure that transportation, and it's just balancing all those things together. So obviously, in order to pay rent, you need to be working. So kind of juggling that. Minimal personal possessions and hoarding tendencies, these kind of go hand in hand. And I by no means want to say that everybody who has experienced domestic violence does display these tendencies, but it's just something that I see. A lot of times the people come to me, and when you flood in the middle of the night, you can't bring everything you've ever owned with you. It's pretty minimal stuff, and usually not big things either. So a lot of times they're coming to me with nothing, and we kind of have to troubleshoot, where are we going to get beds, where are we going to get couches, how are we going to get a table, how are we going to get all these things. And hoarding, on the flip side, I am working with one client right now who really struggles with it a lot. And finally, I just asked her, have you ever explored, why you may feel the way that you do in relation to your possessions? And she shared with me that, well, one time I came home and my abuser threw all my stuff away. He threw it all away. And now I can't go. Now that I am in my own home, I just feel this attachment because I know at any minute they might be taken away from me. And so it's just kind of that relationship with items that people who haven't experienced domestic violence might not even think of. Additionally, I find that it's kind of a way that clients make themselves feel safe. They'll physically kind of barricade themselves into their apartment as a way to feel secure. So that's always a conversation that we have to have too, is, how can we make you feel safe, but also keeping your home a safe and healthy place to be. And sometimes additional expenses come up too in keeping a victim's location a secret. So a lot of apartments, particularly partnership, the parking lot's just open. The cars are just there for everybody to see. It's right off of college. It's on a busy street. The cars are just there. And I have some clients whose abusers are driving around looking for them. So if they see their car, they're going to know exactly where they are. So the options there, either just a safety plan. One time we worked with the Harbor House advocate to cover their car with a big tarp. That's kind of the best you could do in that situation. Other clients I work with that live with third-party landlords, a lot of times they do offer garage parking, but it's an additional expense. So then we kind of have to figure out, how are we going to cover that? So securing housing is only half the battle, and then we move on to address some of these other things. And here is my contact details as well. I can put my chat or my phone number in the chat too. If anybody has any questions now, I'm more than happy to answer them. Or if you would rather follow up in private, I'm perfectly happy to chat then as well.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. Caitlin, did we have any questions pop up in the chat?
We did have one about budgeting from Joseph.
Before we go there, team, this is Lisa Strandberg. I'm the executive director here at Pillars. I have a question for Bryn and for Amber. When I speak about the TBRA program, I occasionally point people to the Netflix show Made. I don't know if either Bryn or Amber has seen that show, but that the protagonist in that show was a recipient of TBRA support. I wonder if either of you have seen it, if you feel it's an accurate representation of the folks that you serve together.
Yes, I have seen Made on Netflix. I highly, highly recommend it. They did an awesome job of portraying just how difficult it is to, why don't you just leave? They did a really good job of that. And I think not only is Made an accurate portrayal of what it's like to be a victim, did an awesome job showing the generational nature of both why someone becomes a victim and why someone uses abusive behaviors. You'll see both of that. And they did an awesome job of showing what trauma does to the brain and how it affects your ability to seek and receive services. So I highly, highly, highly recommend Made. And I would challenge you when you're watching Made, it's about a white woman, to think about how much more challenging it would be if it was a person of color or somebody from the LGBTQ community and so on and so forth, and to think about those different barriers that would exist. We at Harbor House feel it's one of the best portrayals of domestic violence we've seen in the media.
I have actually not seen it, but after that sales pitch, I think I'll have to go watch it. Matt and I were actually chatting about that the other day, how he thought it was a good thing to watch too. So I'll have to check it out.
I feel like I need to issue a disclaimer. That was not a planted question. That was a legit question. Amber and I did not discuss this ahead of time. So.
And one of the things that really stuck out to me, aside from the the generational issues and how a lot of that trauma and issue and behavioral patterns are passed on, was Amber, your slide, where you showed domestic abuse and then layered on all of those additional issues. So many times it's easy from an outside perspective to hyper focus on one issue that an individual might be struggling with, but in reality, there's so many more elements that are coming into play that cause additional challenges. And being able to work with an individual on kind of taking those layers apart and addressing them as you go along, I think is really important and difficult to do, and a struggle to see from the outside. So I really appreciated that slide. Any other questions?
We did have that other question that Caitlin brought up, which was around budget. And Joseph, I don't know if you feel comfortable unmuting or if you want to elaborate on I think you were asking a question of Pillars. Our annual budget is about $4.7 million. That's for all our programming, not just the programming we're discussing today. And a little better than half of that, those expenses are covered by charitable support of one form or another. So I don't know if that answers your question or if there was more to it than that, but that's kind of the broad answer to that question. Amber, I'd welcome you to answer the question as well, in case the question was really meant for Harbor House.
I saw Joseph give you a thumbs up, but I am also happy to answer the question. Harbor House is about a $3.2 million budget. Again, that covers all of the services we offer. About, I would say, quarter to a third of that comes from private donations.
Yeah, and I think, we see something similar here at Pillars too. Just about a little over a quarter of that, about a quarter of that comes from individual donors within the community. And about half overall is from charitable contributions, whether it's area foundations, businesses, individuals, and other grant applications too. So certainly we rely heavily on the support from the community and appreciate everything that you guys do for us. We couldn't do our work without you. And conversations like today are just another way to keep that relationship going. Anyone else want to pop in with a question?
I just have a related question. If money were no issue, how many of these units would you need or utilize?
Lisa and I both laughed at the same time. I think that's such a hard question to answer, Beth, because I feel like, so Harbor House serves about 1,500 clients a year. Of those 1,500, at least a third are housing insecure. So we have 6 units that we work together on this. We probably, I don't even know the number. We could have 500 and it probably wouldn't be enough for all of the clients that Pillars and Harbor House both serve that are experiencing homelessness. I don't know if anyone from the Pillars team has anything to add to that.
Yeah, certainly. Housing instability is a huge issue for us, and it's Pillars' largest bottleneck is moving people through shelter and where do they go? And especially given the current market, I don't know if anybody on this call has tried to rent a place for themselves lately, but it's extremely challenging if you have all of your ducks in a row, if you have sustainable income at a level that's acceptable to a landlord, and that your credit score is high enough, and that you have the good rental background. So even in a ideal situation for a renter, it's really difficult out there right now. So when you start adding on some of those additional barriers, it becomes nearly impossible. We're also seeing with the increase of properties being sold, a lot of the third-party landlords that we've worked with in the past that have grown to trust our staff, trust Pillars, and be willing to, give some of our clients a chance and trust the process. Those units are being sold to somebody that hasn't worked with us before. So even some of our clients that have been stably housed are now uprooted and being asked to leave. So we have an issue beyond just housing our shelter clients, but we're focused on rehousing our stable and supportive clients as well. So certainly I think Amber was probably right in line saying 400 to 500 units in the Fox Valley, and that's to address our clients' needs. That's beyond just the housing market in general.
Yep.
I do have something to add as well. If you notice in my demographic slide, I said I had 10 families and there are only 6 partnership units. We have 4 families that are just housed, exact same program set up, but with third-party landlords. And we actually have room for several more in the budget to do that, the same TBRA program, just in third-party locations. We just can't get people leased up. I keep pulling people off the coordinated entry list. We just can't find landlords that'll take them. And the money's there, but as Matt was saying, so many of our partners that we used to work with are getting bought out, and there's nobody to even advocate to because all the applications are online. When you call it, that you could just get someone that says, "Oh, well, I work at the central office. I don't really do anything at that actual site." So there's nobody to even advocate to. People don't have the time or want to listen to me explain all this work that we've been doing. We just can't get people leased up even if the money is there. So that is just my plug to, if you have any landlords in your life, advocate to them to work with our programming, because it really is an awesome setup if we could just get some people to give us a chance here.
I was at a report regarding downtown this week, and the mayor was begging all the developers at the meeting to build more housing. I mean, there's a lot of talk about it, but I think it's an understanding that it's something we need. So thank you.
I would just only add one thing to that, and that is at Harbor House, we have a 68-bed shelter. Those 68 bed include children. And one of our biggest challenges is that we are an emergency shelter. We're not a long-term housing solution. But so we're often faced with the challenge of, okay, we need to move this person on to the next thing. The safety has been secured. We're not so worried about that anymore. But the next thing, if there isn't anything, Pillars is full, we're full, there's no apartments. So then we're in a place where we need the emergency shelter space. and the client is choosing between no next thing or going back to abusive relationship. So it also creates more cycle and churn there.
Yeah, thank you. I see Bruce has his hand up. Bruce, do you want to unmute and what's your question?
I think you're still muted, Bruce.
There we go.
Am I unmuted?
We can hear you.
No. Oh yeah. Okay. So I think Amber, you just addressed that, and I was wondering how do clients leave the Harbor House? I can understand that it fills up, and the intake I kind of got a pretty good grasp on that. But how do they actually leave from the Harbor House and move on?
So clients could leave for a variety of reasons. Some clients come and they choose to stay with us for 24 hours or 2 weeks, doesn't matter. And it's simply a break. It's a break in their relationship, and it gives everyone time to regroup, and many go back to their partner, which on average, just so you know, it takes about 7 times for a person to leave an abusive relationship before they leave for good. So some people never get to that 7. And that's okay. We're not here to judge that relationship. We're here to support it and support the client in whatever way and help them maintain safety. If they choose to leave the relationship, a couple of things could happen. We have a great relationship with Pillars. Once immediate safety is secured, we would work with Pillars, and ideally we would transition them to a Pillars program. If there's no space available at Pillars, then sometimes we're working and we can secure housing. We do also have a housing navigator on staff. So sometimes folks are leaving for their first apartment or their new place. But then we also try to get creative. If there's no apartment and there's no space at Pillars right now, what's another interim solution? And that could look like, I have an aunt in Stevens Point who has a spare bedroom. And so we would work with them to help provide transportation and housing to transportation to Stevens Point. And that could look like a U-Haul for that. And even more so, what we're really working on right now is called housing first mentality. And that is to secure housing and to hopefully prevent folks from never coming into shelter at all. That once we have that housing secured, then we can work on holistic healing. And we can really get to it. But if you can imagine you're sitting in shelter and you don't know where you're going to go tomorrow, you can't heal from domestic violence. You don't have that safety secured, that permanency secured. So those are just a couple of ways. It looks different for every client, honestly.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. I did want to, and if you have any questions, you can pop your hand up. There's the little icon. Click at the bottom, or pop it in. Yeah.
I think Patricia has a question.
Patricia.
Yes, I do. Thank you, Matt. I wanted to follow up on something, Amber, and I know that you're familiar with our Mission of Hope House in New London, which is a homeless shelter, and it's the only one in Wapaka County. And I know right now, I'm a board member, and I know right now there are openings, and I know we work with Pillars and Lisa and many of you. And I really do appreciate what you said, Amber, because being an emergency shelter, there isn't time sometimes to make those long-term decisions on where to go. We're not any different here, though, to know that sustainable housing is an issue for so many. But I do know we have openings, and I do know that we collaborate and work with many of the other agencies. So if there is a situation, please feel free to reach out to the Mission of Hope House in New London. I appreciate it. And this is a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad you could join us today, Patricia. Thank you. Anna, did you have a question?
I had a quick question. This is probably for Bren and Amber too. So I understand that people experiencing domestic violence would get case management and I was just wondering, is there something that is provided for children who are in those situations? Like, do children get any form of counseling? Because obviously this would be traumatic to them too. Is there something that we do to make sure, especially if, this can create a cycle, like if maybe, we provide services for children so they also understand what's going on, and, I guess that would be my question in totality.
Awesome question. Yes, Harbor House has staff that work specifically with children and youth who have experienced domestic violence. What that looks like is a wide variety of things. That looks like one-to-one case management. We aren't counselors here, we are advocates, but all of our advocates have training in supporting the trauma that occurs. What we also know is that one healthy adult in a child's life can change the trajectory of that child and can prevent future victimization. It can end that cycle, can prevent future victimization or the choice to use abusive behaviors. So we work really hard for our children and youth advocates to try to help be that one healthy adult. They teach coping mechanisms. We also have support groups for children and teens. And then we have fun things. So especially in the summer, we work with kids, and they could be in shelter or not, and really work to let them have a space where they can just be kids. So what that could look like is Lego Club, or painting rocks out on the picnic table, or going to Bay Beach. It's really that moment to just let a kid be a kid and not have all these other things, and just have a moment like that.
Yeah, awesome. And Pillars is kind of a similar setup. We don't have any licensed counselors that work with our kiddos, but we do have some really wonderful partnerships for kids to get that help if they need it. We work really close with Christy Camps, who oversees the events program with AAFP, so she can help get connected with the counselors at school. We also work with Safe Families and Babes, who both provide support to moms. They can watch the kiddos if mom needs a break, just be a good example of a healthy family in our clients' lives. So we do have some resources that we reach out to when those things arise.
Awesome, thank you. One last question, Amber, for you. We know where to go. We know Harbor House, we know Pillars, we know the number to call. Do you have any advice for somebody who might be struggling with asking for help?
So I think a couple of things. My advice is Harbor House is 1000% confidential. We are not allowed to tell anyone by law. We're not allowed to tell anyone that you have called here or sought services here or walked through our doors. That's one. Two, you are under no obligation to use your name. You can be anonymous. Three, you don't have to walk through our doors. If you would rather have us meet you at the library or the laundromat or Perkins, we are happy to do that as well. And we could just be a friend you're meeting with. And then finally, I think I love for folks to know that you don't have to be a victim of domestic violence specifically to call here. Domestic violence affects the entire family. That means you might know that your sister or your brother is in an abusive relationship. That affects you even though you're not the one being abused. So we are here to support you and provide you with guidance in that as well. That's really a hard thing to go through. You also are living in complete frustration and isolation, and we're here to help.
That's great. Thank you so much. So I did just want to, where's my share screen here? Wrap things up here. We've got just a couple minutes left. And I wanted to thank you guys all again for coming. We've got all of our information here. You can follow us on social media, like us, engage with us, ask us questions. Amber's email is in the chat. Bryn's email is in the chat. If you have any questions afterwards, certainly follow up with us. We'd love to hear from you. Love to hear your ideas, questions. Today is actually the last Conversations Over Coffee for the year. So this is held bi-monthly. We do not have one in December. So tune back in early next year for another fun year of conversations over coffee. I did want to just get out there that if you're looking for another way to support Pillars, we have our annual fundraising event coming up November 4th. So just a little less than a month away. Keys to Hope. We'd love to see you there. I think Caitlin's going to drop the link in the chat. Otherwise, you can find that right on our homepage of our website as well. You can, if you're not able to attend the event, you can get a ticket just to get access to the silent auction, which is the most fun part of any fundraising event anyways. So you can get that free ticket access to our silent auction, and you can bid from the comfort of your own home. So again, if you have any questions there, feel free to reach out, but we'd love to see you there. Any other staff members, last things did I forget to include?
Sorry, Matt, I was just gonna throw out, I've added my information in the chat too. If anybody has a specific topic that they would like to see us cover as well in future conversations over coffee, you can shoot me an email at acrispin@pillarsinc.org, and we'd be happy to take on some of those suggestions.
Certainly, thank you, Ayanda. All right, that concludes today's conversation over coffee. I appreciate you guys all coming out and joining us and for engaging in the conversation. Great questions. If you did have any last minute questions, I'll stay on just for a little bit here, but otherwise you're free to go about your day. Thank you.